Hi, welcome to my latest YouTube video. Today I'm going to talk about an element of my observe, don't absorb technique, which is used to help people who identify themselves as having self-love deficit disorder or codependency, which I shorten for SLDD for the problem, and SLD, self-love deficient as a person. We are going to talk about a technique, an idea that I call "it's not about me." I will be featuring this technique in my retreat series. It's a new venture for me and my company, Self-Love Recovery Institute, where I give intensive retreats. Me and another colleague facilitate a 2.5-day retreat in which there is an equal amount of information and experiential exercises to help people not only learn more about their self-love deficit disorder, but to break through to the more hidden, unconscious, and hard to reach information that blocks them from loving themselves. And I try not to react strongly to narcissists, to people who are angry at me, to people who always are very sensitive, or sometimes just people who don't seem to like me. Back in the day, before I had really done a great amount of this self-love recovery work that I talk a lot about, if someone didn't like me, it ruined my whole day. It made me connect with that feeling of core shame, that there must be something wrong with me. And as an SLD, it was this constant barrage that I wasn't good enough. And I was constantly on edge sometimes when I was with people who didn't seem to like me, whether they were narcissists or maybe they just didn't like me, maybe because I wasn't acting likable. I mean, so it's not always about dysfunction, at least with this idea, this technique. But back, in the day, like I said, when I was in my own recovery and I had not learned the lessons that I have adopted and integrated now, I would take it personally. I would look at someone, and if they looked disappointed, I assumed I did something wrong. I assumed it was something I did or something about me. And then that would bring up all sorts of self-talk. You're stupid, you're ugly, whatever my self-talk was, and I would get stuck into self-talk and I would kind of lose myself in it. And the ironic twist of this all is once it got started, it impacted how I not only felt, but how I behaved. So if indeed I was acting somewhat unlikable, say maybe a little bit annoying, let's go for that. And I was with someone who's very judgmental and who didn't like me, or who was a narcissist and didn't like me. And I saw their reactions, rolling the eyes, kind of like this, or maybe not looking at me anymore. I would go into that stinking thinking that, what is wrong with me? Why don't they like me? This, that, and the other. It's that whole dialogue, that narrative that gets stuck in our head, which, by the way, I talk about extensively in one of my trainings, Healing the Inner Trauma Child, in the exercise Disidentifying the Voices. When you get stuck in that cycle, you start to behave like the dislikable person that someone is reacting to. And that's the paradox. That's the catch-22. Someone doesn't seem to like you, whether it is because of something you did that wasn't a big deal, or because they don't like you, or like I said, they're a narcissist. You go into this thinking, I'm this, I'm not good enough, I'm that. You get insecure, you get anxious, and then you start behaving that way. You start to get noticeably anxious, noticeably impatient, and that person starts to react to your reaction. And then the cycle is complete. And if it was about you, then it certainly was really about you. But if it wasn't, and you were just reacting to a narcissist, reaction to you, say they were threatened by you, then you fell prey to the narcissistic manipulation. He didn't like you. You bought, you internalized his narrative that something's wrong with you, and you act even worse, and you gave him proof that there is something wrong with you. So what I did over time was I noticed this very interesting correlation. The healthier that I got, the healthier that my self-esteem became, the more I was able to understand my limitations and embrace them and not condemn myself, the more self-love I had. I mean, simply, the more self-love I had, the more I was able to not let myself get upset if someone didn't like me, someone seemed to be upset at me, or someone disapproved of me. And what I would do, which is the title of this video, is I began to say, it's not about me, it's about them. And I found that statement and the belief of that statement that calmed me down. It enabled me to put the situation in perspective, because as a self-loving person who trauma as a child has, and the core shame and the loneliness and all of that, those levels of the disorder, the self-love deficit disorder that I talk about in my other seminars and other videos, once we heal the foundational elements of self-love deficit disorder, we do not fall prey to the core shame. We don't actually believe it. And we don't go to, it's about me. So let me put this in a simple example. And I'm going to give you back, say 20 years ago. And I'm in, and let's say I'm in a new job, and I'm like any person in a new job, I'm making mistakes, and I'm a little bit anxious and forgetting some things. And one of my colleagues kind of rolls her eyes and gets annoyed at me. Back then, I would have felt upset at myself, because I would have felt that I wasn't, being smart enough. I wasn't learning things quick enough, or there was something about me that wasn't likable. And I would try really hard to figure that out and try to change that part of me that seemed to be aggravating that person. And every time I saw that person, I would be aware of, there's something about me that they don't like, and I got to make myself better. And ultimately what I became was this codependent, or this person with self-love deficit disorder, who was compelled to get stuck in that quandary of, I can only be loved, I can only be liked, I can only be appreciated if I somehow adapt to the person's expectations of me. And I became that person. And as every SLD knows, as every codependent knows, it doesn't make you any more likable. It just makes you more likable to narcissists. Because healthy people, they actually don't they don't feel, they don't connect to people that are always on edge and trying to be the right type of person. So back then, 20 years ago, I would make everything about me. I did something, and it upset someone, and then I reacted, and I internalized it, and I punished myself. So then let's talk about another version of the same story 20 years ago. Someone who was just being, for lack of better words, a total dipshit, a jerk, and was being rude, and was saying, you're just, Rosenberg, you're just not smart enough, or, you keep making mistakes on these reports. That's a memory. and I knew, because I had ADD, actually I wasn't diagnosed at the time, but I knew I kept making mistakes on the reports. But the guy pissed me off. He's a total asshole. Sorry for the swearing. And so I started to react. to this guy, and he was a narcissist. And because he was my boss, I harbored that resentment and anger towards him because he was so judgmental and reactive to me. And so I would then be reacting to him and his narcissistic projection of me. So it still wasn't about me. Here is this narcissist who doesn't like me for whatever reason, and is saying I'm not good, I'm not this or I'm not that, and I'm getting angry because he's judging me. And I am not making the connection. It's not about me. It's about him. So now let's take these two situations now, and let's add someone 20 years later. Say this is a science fiction movie, and I can actually now bring Ross with the psychological health that he has now into that same person. So we go back to the first scenario. I'm at the new job, making some mistakes, and people are getting impatient with me, kind of rolling their eyes. The person with self-love abundance, someone who is in recovery, self-love recovery, is going to feel upset, because no one wants to be, not perfect. Excuse me. No one wants to make mistakes at work, especially the first week. But he's not going to think there's something wrong with him, because he's going to say, it's not about me. I am being normal. I am being the average person, if not a better version, because I have self-esteem. Remember this version? And this is about someone being impatient, but since, they might have influence and I'm the new guy on the block, I'm just going to play the game and let them be who they are. But I'm not going to get triggered. I'm not going to feel core shame. I'm not going to feel afraid that something bad's going to happen. I'm going to know that I'm doing just fine. I'm not going to lose my job. If he doesn't like me, well, it's not about me because I'm likable. I'm doing everything well. And then I go on, and it does not avalanche into, holy shit, he doesn't like me. What happens if I get fired? And I go into this catastrophic thinking, which is very typical of SLDs, which is why they're really anxious and on edge all the time and hypervigilant to almost everything around them, especially when they're around narcissists. Okay, so now let's take the second scenario. And now I can't say his name, but man, I'd love to say his name because this guy was really hard on me. And so I have this boss who is just completely nailing me on all of my mistakes on my reports, and upset at me that I'm not remembering all these like graphical and numerical responsibilities for the job. And I have self-love. I am the Ross that I am now. I'm going to know that this guy's got some issues. I'm going to, because I now have a narcometer built in me, which I talk about in other videos, an intuitive sense of knowing when someone is a narcissist. And when you have that narcometer, you then not only can know and predict who that person is, but you can kind of predict what's going to happen, and you can then apply the observe, don't absorb technique. I call that predictive awareness, which I talk about extensively in my observe, don't absorb videos. So the boss who's being and hard on me, I am not internalizing what he's doing to me. I'm knowing it's him. So I don't beat myself up. I don't get anxious. I don't feel like I'm in a double bind, which is the world view of the SLD. You love the narcissist. You like the narcissist. You need the narcissist, but you can't be alone or separated from them. And so I will know, well, this guy's being unfair. He's kind of being a jerk, and it's not about me. It's about him. And I'm going to do my very best. And I know I'm good at my job, and I'm not going to get fired. I'm going to figure this out, and everything's going to be okay. My mind doesn't escalate. I don't start to get anxious. I don't start to forget things. And many of us know when we get anxious or scared or paranoid, we start to actually actualize our greatest fear. We call that a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm going to get fired, because he's finding all my mistakes, and you get nervous and anxious and you start to make mistakes, and next thing you know, you get fired. Or I go on a date and she didn't, when I tried to kiss her, she backed her face away. I mean, gently, of course. She must hate me. This is wrong. Everything's going to go bad. Versus, well, maybe I just went to kiss her. It's too soon. Maybe I should wait till the third date or fourth date and be a gentleman. But the person who goes into the stinking thinking and says, this is about me, then starts to act anxious, and that's my story in my romantic life. I would get anxious, and I would think I must have done something wrong, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. And then I started to act weird, and then I gave them reason to not like me. It's not about me idea, or I suggest technique, is crucial in self-love recovery. I will be talking about this again in my upcoming retreat seminar, because of the fact that it is both an intellectual concept that connects to the sum total of all my self-love recovery concepts, or my self-love deficit disorder concepts, and it involves an experiential component, which we'll get to do in the retreat. So I thank you, and always thank you. You guys have made my life so much more rich, knowing that me, Ross Rosenberg, can do these videos, and all you guys like them. Boy, no one told me that when I was a kid growing up with a narcissist. So thank you. I'll continue to do my best, and please check out my book, The Human Magnet Syndrome, or my full-length seminar videos at selfloverecovery.com. Now, please know that I don't put on a lot of original content on YouTube because my job is to make videos and make a living, and I can't give it all away for free. But as many of you guys know, I got 95 videos out here, and that's also a part of what I want to do. So if you want to know more and get into the nitty-gritty of my work and not get bits and pieces, go to SLRI's website. Be well and take care.